Follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. The battle lines are being drawn. This just in, as we produce this over the noon hour, the Associated Press suing the State Department to force release of Clinton emails. Here we go. So get this. I guess we're getting the mainstream media doing the bidding for the House Benghazi Committee. This is the statement from the Associated Press General Counsel Karen Kaiser. She says that after careful deliberation and exhausting our options, the Associated Press is taking the necessary legal steps to gain access to these important documents, which will shed light on actions by the State Department and former Secretary Clinton, a presumptive 2016 presidential candidate, during some of the most significant issues of our time. The press is a proxy for the people, and the Associated Press will continue its pursuit of vital information that's in the public's interest through this action in future open records requests. So we're now in the arena of trust. Okay, so they didn't trust what Hillary Clinton had to say yesterday, the Associated Press, and so they're now going to sue for the documents. All good. This means that this server will probably be released. I find it interesting on many fronts. And I want you to use your imagination a little bit here. And I'm not the biggest Clinton supporter in the world, but I would not have a problem with her being president of the United States one bit. We're supposed to trust Trey Gowdy, a right-wing, redneck, conservative lawyer from the 4th District in South Carolina, Tea Partier. He is the chairman of the House Benghazi Committee. He wants the server. He wants an independent arbiter to get his or her hands on the server. Really? So we're supposed to trust someone so we can trust Hillary. Considering the fact that the Clintons have been such an incredible political target of this country since the day they left Arkansas. And can you imagine Trey Gowdy, who I just described factually who he is from South Carolina, that he would actually come out and exonerate Hillary Clinton of any wrongdoing whatsoever once all of the information is compiled? And what kind of political future do you think Trey Gowdy would have? He would be the one who would be marked for life politically that he's the guy that said Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong. Let me tell you something, folks. They would manufacture it if they couldn't find it. That's where we are. This is all about politics. We have already turned over every stone possible on Benghazi, but not to the thirst-quenching level of the right-wing Republicans who can't stand the Clintons. And actually, it gets better. Hillary Clinton saying yesterday that she was using the server that was provided to the former president, who happens to be her husband. Listen to this.
The system we used was set up for President Clinton's office, and it had numerous safeguards. It was on property guarded by the Secret Service, and there were no security breaches.
That is just that is just meat on the bone for the right wing. Oh, we're going to find out what Billy was doing. We're going to get all the gushy details surrounding the Clinton personal life. I think yesterday, and I feel the same way today, she stood the test. She's on record now. She says she didn't do anything illegal. And let me emphatically state, I don't believe that there's anything against the law. You're not a criminal if you delete personal emails. But what they're saying is that, oh, wait a minute, those emails could have had business. And this is where the trust comes in. That there could have been some personal emails mixed in with some government business that really explained everything about Benghazi. That's where they are. Now, I still maintain the position that, look, not everybody in Hillary Clinton's demographic wants to carry around a bunch of electronics. I just don't. I think that we can lose sight of the practical in all of this. And I think that her answer about convenience, easily understood. Her reference to personal email and privacy, I think the majority of Americans can certainly understand that. Tell me, who doesn't delete personal emails? Who doesn't do that? For whether if it's room on a server or for whatever reason. I would speculate that maybe Hillary Clinton is probably trying to protect some of her friends or maybe has some personal issues that she simply does not want out in public that have nothing to do whether she can do her job professionally. And so this Gowdy character is now probably genuflecting to the Associated Press, which is going to be very hard for the right wing to come out and say that the mainstream media is doing them a favor. So that's where we are with, and I thought it was very Clinton-esque yesterday, holding to the true tradition of punching back politically when Hillary came out and made this statement about the 47 senators signing on a letter to Iran.
The recent letter from Republican senators was out of step with the best traditions of American leadership. And one has to ask, what was the purpose of this letter? There appear to be two logical answers. Either these senators were trying to be helpful to the Iranians or harmful to the commander-in-chief in the midst of high-stakes international diplomacy.
Senator Coons will join me tonight on the Ed Show to talk about this. He sits on foreign relations. Ring of Fire Radio brings you this podcast along with Raw Story, and also iTunes is where you can get it. You can follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. Communication Workers of America, they are working awfully hard with progressive allies, CWA building a mass movement to restore workers' bargaining rights and reclaim our democracy. You can learn more at their website at cwa-union.org. Now this.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast and tell us how we're doing. More details at WeGotEd.com.
Thank you for being right here on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. Thanks for the download. All of a sudden, the president and the vice president are concerned about this depletion of union membership in America. They were over at the International Firefighters Convention yesterday in Washington, and the vice president spoke talking about the attack on labor. There's an attack on labor's house. I'm glad it's on their radar screen, but I do for a moment want to set the record straight as I have in the past. This is just me talking. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I believe that in many respects, the Obama administration has been a no-show when it comes to labor. They'd have never beaten Hillary back in 2008 without labor support. Would have never beaten John McCain. Would have never been reelected had it not been for labor. It was labor that produced the 47% tape that deep-sixed Mitt Romney's campaign in August all the way up to the election. It was the outsourcing, and it was the union folk that brought that to the table. And had that not happened, who knows who'd be president right now. The fact is, when the protesters were in the streets in Wisconsin, and it was the biggest story in the country, Obama was a no-show. His advisors, David Axelrod and Robert Gibbs, said, well, that's a state issue. There has been right-to-work fights in every state in this union that has been controlled by Republican legislate state houses. And not once has the president gone on the road and advocated against right-to-work or tried to rally troops in states that were fighting this. And so now that Scott Walker has signed this bill, right to work, into law in Wisconsin, the president decides to put out a statement on just how damaging it is. Really? Finally got on the radar screen? The Employee Free Choice Act never saw the light of day with the Obama administration because the economy and the automobile industry took a lot of oxygen out of the room. But it was the top priority, along with health care, with the unions. The Employee Free Choice Act never got a sniff. And it's hard, as I see it, for this president to go against 64 unions that are on paper, documented, signed against fast track, which would be greasing the skids for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And now there's conversation about a possible deal that some Democrats, and we'll talk about this tonight on the Ed Show, Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio, who's a good friend of mine and a good labor supporter, he's running it up the flagpole. Well, we shouldn't give them TPP or fast track unless we get infrastructure spending and get a bill there. Now, I guess my gut instinct to that is that you're not going to reverse TPP. This is for generations to come. Bridges eventually are going to fall down. We've already seen that. I don't think we should have to negotiate away, but at least somebody's trying to get something done. I give them credit for that. The story reads this morning in the USA Today. A top union official put lawmakers on notice on Tuesday that votes in favor of giving President Obama fast-track authority for a pending multilateral trade pact will be used against them in the 2016 elections. It's been a long time since all unions have been on board against something, as they are collectively against the TPP, and now going so far as to point fingers, this will be used against you if you work with the president on TPP. For more on all of this, let's go to United Steelworkers International President, Mr. Leo Gerard. Leo, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Ed.
There's a lot of news unfolding here.
There is a lot.
Where are we? This is AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka saying this at a reporter roundtable yesterday. Your take on all this?
Yes, well, look, we've had, as I mentioned once before, we had a very, very intense and constructive discussion at the last AFL-CIO Executive Council meeting, and it was unanimous that fast track was bad for workers in every sector of the economy, and that we needed to do everything possible. And there's absolutely no reason to be in favor of fast track because every agreement that's been passed by fast track has ended up costing us net job losses. And I just saw that today even Paul Krugman and even Larry Summers are coming out saying that the TPP is not an agreement that they would support. Larry Summers said the vision of TPP was good, but what appears to be on the table now is not helpful. So fast track is the poison pill. If they get to pass fast track, they get to do whatever the heck they want. If they don't pass fast track, then any bill would have to come before Congress, and once Congress starts to look at it, we would know that there's a problem. I do want to comment on the issue and this won't be a surprise to anybody about my view, the issue of trading TPP for infrastructure.
That was my next question.
One of the problems with infrastructure is all the damn infrastructure is being built with foreign steel. We got bridges that are months behind, if not years behind. They can't hold the well. We've got pipelines that are being built with foreign pipe. We filed a trade case against South Korea. We won the trade case, and what was South Korea's response? They increased their exports and said, take us to the WTO. So by the time we do that, it'll be another 18 months as a result of those stupid trade deals. And then after another 18 months, the steel industry will be back on its knees. Do the same thing with paper, the same thing with tires. So if we're going to talk about infrastructure and we're going to talk about rebuilding the American infrastructure, we need to talk about doing it with the right equipment, not Chinese junk.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there a possibility that you would go along with a trade in legislation, stamp of approval for TPP? Where do you think unions would come down on this if there was an infrastructure package put on the table that was rather substantial? Is that worth it?
Look, I think that as far as I'm concerned, they're two separate issues. Yeah. We eventually have to rebuild the infrastructure of this country. I mean, everything from schools that are more, schools that are more than 60 years old, where the kids are living or going to school in bad environments. We've got roads and bridges. We've got airports. I mean, fly out of the Washington National Airport and go to Pittsburgh. You got to take a bus to get out onto the tarmac. You got to wait on the bus. Then they take you out. They put you on the plane. Then you got to wait. And then after that, when you get back, you got to carry your own luggage. It's like you're flying into a third world country, and this is the nation's capital. Mm-hmm. So the whole airline infrastructure is falling apart. The trucking infrastructure is falling apart. The pipeline infrastructure is falling apart. The rail infrastructure is falling apart. Roads and bridges are are in disrepair. I mean, you got, and I pose the question sometimes to some of the corporate and Wall Street people. Tell me what part of our infrastructure would meet a AA standard? Not one.
Yeah. Let's talk TPP again from what's unfolding here. This story in the USA Today reads that the trade pact, known as the Trade Benefits America Coalition, an amalgamation of more than 250 business interests and corporations who are lobbying Congress to go ahead with Fast Track. There's a real lobbying effort in Congress to get a stamp of approval here. And Kevin Madden, who worked on the Romney campaign, this should get people's ears up a little bit, said that we believe this debate will be won by having local voices who support trade and its impact on the economy make that case directly to lawmakers.
Well, look, there are no local voices that are in favor of the trade deal. If you look at not just this trade deal but previous trade deals, if you ask what the direction on trade that America's going in, and you ask the local people, as this guy called them, you ask the local citizens, almost 75 to 79% are opposed to more trade deals like the ones we've passed.
Yeah.
So this is a what they call an AstroTurf group that's been put together by corporate money to pretend that they speak for rank and file workers. They don't. They speak for the people who will benefit, and let's not be shy about it. Wall Street benefits on both sides of this. Multinational corporations benefit on both sides of this. And even if they keep their jobs here, they use the fact that you have to compete against China. Now we're going to say we have to compete against Vietnam at 26 cents an hour or 70 cents an hour. We're going to have to compete against Vietnam. Well, tell me what. Tell me what we're going to compete against in Brunei. What are we going to compete against in Brunei, where Brunei brings in foreign workers to do their labor and pay them next to nothing, hold their passports while they're there. And somehow we say, well, we're going to do a deal with Brunei and we're going to do a deal with Vietnam and we're going to raise their standards. So you raise it from 75 cents to 78 cents? Give me a break. These guys are a bunch of phonies, Ed, and we need to out them.
Well, it's going to all unfold in the month of April. That's what Senator Orrin Hatch is saying. He said they postponed it, taking up fast-track bill until April to build support for it. So we are, in these weeks, really in the 11th hour after years of fighting this.
If they took the vote today on fast track, they would lose.
In the House.
And as I said, what we did at the AFL, with all of the unions there represented and some unions that aren't yet affiliated to the AFL, we were unanimous in our opposition to fast track.
Yeah.
We were unanimous. There are no funds going to anyone in the Congress. Any committee for this or committee for that are not getting any financial support from the labor movement. And when this vote is finished, then we're going to meet again as a movement, reassess our positions.
All right. United Steelworkers International President Leo Gerard. Mr. Gerard, I think we're on the path to defeat fast track and get the truth to the American people. I appreciate your accessibility and your passion on all of this. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks. Never give up, never give in. Just keep on fighting until we win.
That's what we're doing. Thanks, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You can follow me at Ed Show. Tonight, the Ed Show on MSNBC will be talking about this story, no doubt. Ring of Fire Radio brings you this broadcast along with Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing. Now this.
As Secretary of State, I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two. Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue.
So with Al Gore, we had an inconvenient truth, and with Hillary Clinton, we have a convenient truth. Is it the truth? I believe it is. Many conservatives don't. Richard Viguerie, godfather of the conservative movement and chairman of conservativehq.com, joins us. Mr. Viguerie, it's good to have you back with us.
Oh,
Always good to talk to you, Ed. You say you believe her. I suspect if there were a poll done this morning, you would be in a distinct minority of Americans, not just Republicans or Democrats. But I don't think America's buying this, Ed. I mean, didn't come out of the blue. This is kind of a 30-year track record with the Clintons of cover-up. It goes back to before Whitewater days, Rose law firm Billings showing up mysteriously in the White House. Just a long history of cover-ups, and I think everybody realizes she did this for her political advantage. And it's good. This is like a centipede with 100 legs. It's just this story's got legs that are going to go on until as long as she's on the political landscape.
So eloquently put by a good conservative, Richard Viguerie. That's where it is, folks. There's no trust in the Clintons, is there, Mr. Viguerie?
No, there isn't. And conservatives, Ed, are kind of in a quandary here. We're, there's a certain, pleasure you're getting from seeing the Clintons, in these problems here, struggling. But we don't want her to be in too much trouble here because we want her to get the nomination. And once you get the nomination, then there'll be plenty of opportunity to get into some of these issues. But we want to make sure that the Democrats don't throw her overboard, throw her under the bus. We want her to be the nominee. We don't want to run against something kind of new and shiny, and it doesn't have a 30-year record of baggage that this lady has.
Well, that's interesting you put it that way. I have not heard it presented in that manner, that you actually want Clinton to get the nomination. So where does that leave Trey Gowdy, who's the chairman of the House Benghazi Committee? He wants the server. He wants an independent arbiter. He wants every damn email the Clintons have ever sent to anybody, anyhow, anyway. And so if we're not going to trust the Clintons, we're supposed to trust a Tea Party conservative from South Carolina that he would someday exonerate the Clintons. I just don't see that happening.
No, I think what America wants is they want an honest third-party person to come in and look at these emails. Trey Gowdy's not asking to look at her personal emails, but he wants an objective, unbiased person or group of people. Right now, she's saying, trust me and my lawyers, to decide what is national security, what's work-related. Trust us. Well, there's no trust with the Clintons. The American people, they may or may not like them for this reason or that reason, but there's not any trust with the Clintons in America.
Mr. Viguerie, that's really what fires up the liberal base and even people who think that Hillary isn't liberal enough. And there's a lot of those millions of people out there that think that. But when they view this as a political attack, and the 30-year narrative on the Clintons is the steamboat behind all of this. What law did she break? I mean, were the emails secure? I mean, that's what I'm focusing on. If I thought that the emails were insecure, I'd be troubled by it. But if she's on a system that the former president used, and if she did it for convenience, what laws are broken? And I think that's where the focus has got to go. You may see it differently. What do you think?
Well, she clearly violated State Department rules and regulations. There may not be a federal law, but Ed, that there were rules set forth by the State Department.
Well, the boss changes the rules.
What we're talking about now is in a very real way, she's becoming Nixonian. I remember, Ed, the moment it occurred to me, and I got used to bristle when Democrats, the media, would attack Nixon as tricky, deceitful. And I remember one day in the '68 election, I realized he really is tricky. He really is deceitful. And at some point, the liberals are going to realize she really and Bill are not really trustworthy. They're not really honest people. They do hide things. And it's very, very similar to Nixon. At some point, the liberals will realize, maybe we just can't continue going through life defending this lady.
All right. We thought we'd hear from an old-time conservative that's been down the road just a few times. Richard Viguerie, godfather of the conservative movement and chairman of conservativehq.com. Mr. Viguerie, always a pleasure to visit with you.
My pleasure, Ed. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Ed Show, The Ed Show tonight on MSNBC. This is brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. Ring of Fire Radio is where you can get this podcast and on Raw Story. Ted Strickland is the former governor of Ohio. He's running for the United States Senate. And, of course, in the Senate, one of the big discussions right now is should these 47 senators on the right wing have sent a letter to the Iranians. On MSNBC Tuesday morning, Senator Tom Cotton, who's the quarterback of this hit job, said this.
As Prime Minister Netanyahu said last week, if they want to be treated like a normal nation, they should act like a normal nation. The real alternative, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, to a bad deal is a better deal with more sanctions.
Well, Mr. Cotton needs to realize that Netanyahu wasn't elected twice in America. As far as reversing course, Senator Marco Rubio, who wants to run this country, says no way.
This is an unusual moment with an incredible risk to the world and our country and the region, and it required unusual methods to deal with it.
Unusual methods, and he'd do it again. On the Ed Show last night, Senator Ben Cardin responded.
Well, Ed, this was a clear partisan effort to weaken the President of the United States during a time of critical international negotiations. There is no way you can justify this letter. It certainly weakened the United States.
Is it a campaign issue? Let's go to the Heartland, Ted Strickland. Mr. Strickland, former governor of Ohio, running for the United States Senate in the Buckeye State. Great to have you with us.
Ed, it's wonderful to be with you, and absolutely this should be an issue because what Rob Portman and 46 other senators have done, Republican senators, I think endangers our national security, and they're playing politics with something that is very serious, and Ohioans will take this seriously, I believe.
What is the issue here? Why do you think this was put together? Was it because of the deal, or is it the hatred for Obama, or is it, does Netanyahu actually have that kind of influence over the conservatives in this country? Unpack that for us.
Well, I think it's a little of all of those things, Ed. But the fact is that the Republican leadership has shown total disdain for our president. And we can speculate as to why they treat him as they do. But the fact is that for them to write a letter to the Ayatollah in Iran and try to undercut our president, a man who was elected 2 times by the people of this country by significant margins, for them to do this, I think, is totally irresponsible. And it shows that they really are not ready to govern this country. They may have the majority in the Senate, but what they've done with this action shows that they simply are not ready to lead this country as a responsible majority in the United States Senate should do.
Mr. Strickland, what do you hear from Ohioans when you're out campaigning? What's on their mind?
Well, Ed, I went into a little breakfast shop here in Columbus, Ohio this morning. A man came up to me, and he said to me, "You're Mr. Strickland?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, let me tell you what I'm going to do later today." He said, "I'm going to call Senator Rob Portman, and I'm going to tell him what he has done in sending this letter is shameful, and he ought to apologize to the people of our state for doing it." Now, that's just one person, but that's just a person that I met randomly this morning. And I think that really reflects the feelings and the attitudes of many Ohioans, Republican and Democrat alike. They simply know when it comes to the national security of this country, we ought not to be playing politics. We ought not to be taking cheap shots at the president. We need to be acting in a unified way to make sure that the national security of this country comes first, certainly above partisan politics.
And Mr. Strickland, if you were in the Senate right now, would you give the president fast-track authority? How would you vote?
Well, I absolutely would not. But see, that's a legitimate issue, and I think it's legitimate for Republicans and Democrats who disagree with the history of our trade policies and who disagree with the current direction of our trade negotiations to disagree with the president. You know, I'm not a person who is going to be a rubber stamp for the president simply because he's of my party. But there's a major difference between opposing the president on a domestic issue like fast-track authority and then undercutting the president when we are engaged in these sensitive negotiations to try to keep Iran from acquiring a nuclear capability.
Straight question, straight answer. I appreciate it. And finally, did Hillary Clinton do enough yesterday? Your thoughts?
Well, I watched part of her press conference. I thought she spoke directly to the issue. There are people who disagree. She admitted in that press conference that if she had to do over again, she probably would have done it differently. But for those who try to conjure up whitewater and imagine scandals of the past and paint the Clintons with a broad brush, I just find that unacceptable. I think this is not a major issue. It is one that I think she has spoken to, and she has said, if I had it to do over again, I would do it differently. But to imagine some vast conspiracy, I think, is just playing into what we have seen come out of the Republican leadership in the House, and that's, an attempt to drag on this Benghazi investigation forever, spending multiple millions of dollars, when we ought to be thinking about other things, Ed. We ought to be thinking about how to create jobs in this country and having a trade policy that protects American workers, and how to make sure that everyone has health care and we can educate our kids. There are so many major issues facing this country that we ought to be focusing on.
The travesty in all of this, at least one of them anyway, is that the good that the Clintons have done with the Clinton Global Initiative and all of the ambassador-type work that Hillary Clinton has done over the years is being overshadowed by this. And this morning, the story got a new set of legs because the Associated Press is suing the State Department to force release of the Clinton emails. So there was enough of a frenzy and a shot of adrenaline on the part of the right wing to keep firing away at this House Benghazi committee to the point where the curiosity of the media is now onto the emails. So this isn't going to go away anytime soon. There's no question about that. Mr. Strickland, always good to visit with you. The best to you. We'll do it again, and keep up the fight, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ed. It's good talking with you and your listeners.
You bet. Ohio Governor Ted Strickland running for the United States Senate. He's a former governor of Ohio. John Kasich on the right side is also thinking about running for president, but no official announcement, of course. This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast, the Ed Show tonight on MSNBC. Senator Barbara Boxer will be joining me tonight. Also, Senator Coons will join us. Ring of Fire Radio sponsors this broadcast, along with Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. You can find all of those sponsors on my website at wegoted.com. rawstory.com is where you can get this podcast as well. We'll see you tonight, and we're back tomorrow.